It's time for RealAg Radio on Rural Radio Channel 147 on Sirius XM. RealAg Radio and RealAgriculture.com is your home for insight and analysis of the issues that are impacting your farm business. Let's get real and get connected with RealAg Radio. Welcome to RealAg Radio here on Rural Radio 147, Sirius XM. Shaun Haney, your host here on this Friday edition of the show. Hey, thanks so much for making RealAg Radio and Rural Radio 147 a big part of your work day, and a big shout out as well to everybody listening out there on the RealAg Radio podcast. Well, it's Friday, which means we have a RealAg Issues Panel. We're also going to be joined today by Anne Wasko of the Gateway Livestock Exchange. We're going to get an update on the cash markets in Canada and the U.S. I know she also has some Canadian beef retail numbers to share with us. And we're also going to talk about some of the inventory reports. One in the U.S. has already come out, and what to expect from the Canadian one that is about to. So we got lots there. And then Lyndsey Smith and Kelvin Heppner will join me for the RealAg Issues Panel. We're going to talk about the latest results of the Canadian Farmer Sentiment Index. We're going to talk about Buhler looking for a buyer or investor, and a whole lot more. Lots of happening. You know what? This is what they call the dog days of summer, but there is nothing dog days about the amount of issues that are happening as drought continues to really, really constrict the mood and the feeling in Western Canada. We've definitely seen a slide in some of the crop conditions. And you know what? What's good, on a good side of the equation, is what I've been hearing out of Central Canada in Ontario is a lot of optimism of what that yield could be for that corn and soybean crop, and almost too much moisture in some areas. As you talk to some people, but a lot better than Western Canada. There's no doubt about that. Okay, if you have any feedback on today's show, we would love to hear from you. There's lots of ways to get a hold of us. I want your feedback, whether you agree or disagree with something that is said on the program. We want your perspective. It's a two-way conversation. I think it's important the audience contributes to the discussion. So first off, send me an email, shaney@realagriculture.com. You can also find us across all the different social media platforms. Make sure, when you go to our YouTube channel, when you're watching those videos, all those videos we create, make sure you like and you subscribe to the channel and like those videos. If you're here, and you can comment there too. Why not? Do that. Or you can call the RealAg feedback line. The number is 855-776-6147. Okay. Anne Wasko is on the line, standing by, but we got to take a break, and when we come back, we're going to talk beef right after this.
When it comes to the productivity and efficiency of your operation, every decision counts. One of those decisions is how you fuel your equipment. You need to be sure that it will run efficiently and without unnecessary downtime. Count on Co-op and your local Co-op fuel team to keep your equipment running smoothly with seasonally blended high-quality fuels and premium lubricants with guaranteed performance. We are Western Canadian. We are fueling harvest. We are Co-op.
The Pulse School on RealAgriculture.com has everything you need to get your crop off to a great start and a strong finish. Whether you're growing chickpeas, faba beans, lentils, or peas, you'll get all the latest and best agronomic information at PulseSchool.com. A library of top-notch agronomy videos from industry experts available on demand at your fingertips. Visit the Pulse School, brought to you by BASF on RealAgriculture.com.
This year might bankrupt us. If I lose the farm, I'm letting down generations of my family. Why am I the only one who can't handle it? Maybe the farm would be better off without me. Hello?
Hey, I was just thinking about you and thought I'd say hi. I know it's been a hard season, and I wanted to see how you're holding up.
We might feel alone, but we're all in this together. Visit domore.ag for mental health supports tailored for the agriculture community.
It's time to talk about the beef markets here on RealAg Radio. This segment's brought to you by Fuel at Co-op. So power through harvest with Co-op fuels and lubricants made for the longest days and the biggest equipment. Performance you can rely on. Go to fuel.crs. to find out more. We're joined right now for the beef market update by Anne Wasko, the Gateway Livestock Exchange. Anne, summer, it was a hot week.
Oh, yeah, everywhere.
Now, when you're out riding the range, so to speak, do the horses like this heat?
Oh, well, you start early. In this kind of, cows, horses, you name it. You just start early and pack it. No, nobody likes it. No.
It's been hot. Very, very hot. And the grass could use some moisture as well. Let's get the cash price update on both sides of the border.
Yeah, well, pretty quiet on the fed cattle markets, both sides of the border. The U.S., we've seen some bids. I think we'll see some trade here later today in Texas and Kansas, but so far just bids in the south, and it looks like that 175. If that were to materialize, that's a $3 lower market than last week. Not unexpected. There's been a little bit of dressed business in the north at 292. That's $2 lower than last week, but again, too late to really establish or call the market. On the wholesale price, pretty flat as well this week. It closed last night on the choice at 302 US. That's about 75 cents off of last week's close. I do think it's showing signs of finding its summer low, and again, pretty much on track from a seasonal timing perspective. Here in Western Canada, we did have some dressed sales, not a pile of business, but 390 to 395 delivered. That's steady to 5 lower than last week. That's probably going to put Canfax's weekly average in the low 230s, which will be kind of like $3 to $4 lower than last week. So, kind of those summer doldrums continue.
Yeah. Now let's tie that to, well, we're going to get to the retail stuff in a second. A couple weeks ago, right after we did our last update, there was a U.S. inventory report. Did you have any takeaways from that?
Yeah, I just wanted to update listeners to, I'm sure that most people have heard the numbers, but I kind of just wanted to tie it into thinking about so when our Canadian numbers come out in a couple weeks to kind of put the two in perspective. So U.S. beef cows were down pretty close to 3%, 29.4 million head. Beef replacement heifers were down 2% at 4 million. The feeder cattle outside of feedlots down 4%. So that was a little bit bigger than pre-report expectations. So the bottom line from the report, tight supplies, tight, especially on the feeder cattle side going forward, supporting this feeder market as we've seen. And I think, there was no signs in this report, as we all expected, of any kind of expansion commencing yet. So when we move forward another 6 months to the January report, that's where I think a lot in the U.S. Expect that some of the 2023 heifer calf crop will have been retained and will start to show up in the 2024 numbers. When we see the reports come, and this is where I think things will differ between the U.S. and Canada going forward for at least the next year, until it rains, let's put it that way, that we will not see. So I think this report that comes out in 2 weeks will be down. Numbers will be down, cow numbers, replacement numbers, everything will be down. The question then, is there going to be any retention of heifer calves this fall? Given what's going on with drought here in Western Canada, lack of feed supplies, feed prices, and record calf prices, I think those heifer calves are going to go to town, so they're not going to be retained. But, that's my speculation, but some things to watch as we go forward through the next report and into next year. Yeah,
all we've heard, I think back to CattleCon, the NCBA convention in New Orleans in early February. A lot of talk. Matt Makins from CattleFax gave a presentation on the weather patterns, and a lot of talk about this shift and an opportunity for us to have some more moisture. And what? Quite frankly, if you look at Saskatchewan as an example, in the early part of the year, we did have some moisture, and the crops were off to a decent start for the most of the province. And even in your area, there was some grass, and things were good. And we've kind of slid from there. And it's amazing how the drought has really dampened some of the outlook that some people had. I think you're exactly right on what happens with the lack of retention of heifers here in Canada versus the U.S. We just did our Canadian Farmer Sentiment Index for July, and when we look at primarily livestock people and ask them about will the next 5 years be generally good times or generally bad times, okay? On a scale of 200. On a scale of 200, 100 being neutral, Primarily livestock, say 15. 15. So we're talking about 5 years. So when we talk about this cattle cycle that is upon us and where prices are going to be for feeder animals, the drought has really, really extinguished people seeing that as an opportunity, because if you don't have grass, how do you have more head?
Yeah, so it's easy to talk about these record cattle prices, but on the expense side, or just even getting your hands on feed or grass, I mean that's the key part. Record prices are secondary to all these other things. So that's the unfortunate part of what's going on here in Western Canada, and this drought just weighing on these decisions and basically forcing liquidation to continue.
Yeah, and just to put it in context, that 15 for primarily livestock, that's in relation to primarily crops being a 65.
Wow.
That's a big difference. Still big pessimistic difference on the crop side, but not a 15. Okay, so let's tie that to the July slaughter data, because those are tied together. Yeah,
so tighter supplies, kind of you see it kind of everywhere you look in terms of smaller production, smaller slaughter. So we just finished July, obviously. So with the final Canadian slaughter data in, fed cattle slaughter in July was down 9% from last year. If you recall, June was also down 9%. So we've had two pretty small months back to back versus last year. Cow slaughter in Canada was up 2%. Year to date, it's up 5%. So again, reflecting what's going on in the countryside in terms of these smaller fed cattle supplies from a smaller calf crop over numerous years. But at the same time, this drought has sent more cows to town in the first 7 months of 2023.
That trend just continues.
Yeah.
We just can't break it. Just can't. Okay, something I'm interested. There's new data out on the Canadian retail beef prices. What does that show? Because there's something that has been quite lofty.
Well, yeah, and this one isn't going to stop that. And that's not a surprise. We were, certainly as supplies tighten, guess what's going to happen, Shaun? Retail prices are going to stay elevated. That's just how you ration these smaller supplies. So this is going to carry on. This isn't the last of it, if you will. But June's retail beef price, according to Stats Can, was up 10% from last June.
Oh.
21.31 a kg, if you're keeping track of the numbers. The only number that's higher than that, so it's the second highest monthly retail beef price we've ever had, other than June of 2020. What happened in June of 2020? Of course, that's when packers were not harvesting cattle due to the COVID closures and whatnot, and prices shot up. So this is comparable to that. Just for the record, June pork prices were down 7% at the counter, and chicken prices were up 7% from last year.
So what does this tell us from a demand standpoint? If I had $1 for every time somebody in the audience said, how long are people going to keep on buying beef at these prices? I would have some more money in my bank account than I currently do. What does this tell us? What's the signal?
Well, demand has been so far very strong on both sides of the border, U.S. and Canada. And I think it does show, and we've continued to see, especially the U.S. economy, be extremely resilient through this time frame. In terms of generally economic slowdowns, we continue to see spending up. Look at housing prices. It's not just what's been going on in the food category. So we will watch at some point. I think that concern, especially beef versus pork, we all are kind of waiting. Are we going to see more trade down or trade overs to pork? It just, so far it hasn't been the case. But we've come through the first half of the year, the first 7 months of the year in pretty good shape. That's something we're going to continue to watch. And I think that's one of our biggest unknowns going forward at these high price levels is, how does demand hold up? We know it's going to be, there's less product. There's no question about that. But how does the consumer hold up in terms of these kinds of price levels?
The other thing about 2020 that is a little bit different, in June of 2020, huge attention on packer margins. Yeah, and that's completely evaporated in terms of the discussion points. That's a bit of a difference right now too.
Exactly. Last week, for example, packers were in the red, and certainly cattle feeders and feeder cattle operators were in the black, for sure.
Just need some rain. And thanks so much for joining us here this week. All the best to you. Have a great weekend.
Okay, thanks. You too, Shaun.
When we come back on RealAg Radio, Kelvin and Lyndsey will be here, and we'll get to the RealAg Issues Panel. Lots to discuss. We'll be right back. You're listening to RealAg Radio, Rural Radio 147.
Does your N stabilizer contain an active ingredient load high enough to be agronomically effective? If not, it could be costing you time and money. If you're putting down a nitrogen stabilizer, put your trust in Koch Agronomic Services. Solutions like Super U, Tribune, and Anvil. Each delivers high active ingredient concentrations that low-rate products just can't match. Compare how imitator products stack up to agronomically effective solutions at defendyourn.ca.
As you head out into the field this season, the Corn School's got you covered. Everything from tillage discussions, weed control info, field trial results, yield strategies, and more. The Corn School on RealAgriculture.com has the information and advice you need to help you succeed. Brought to you by Pride Seeds and BASF. Corn School episodes are available at cornschool.com, from RealAgriculture.com, or as a podcast from your favorite streaming service. Download the latest episode today.
Hi, I'm Bernard Tobin, host of the Soybean School on RealAgriculture.com. Throughout the year on the Soybean School, we'll bring you timely agronomic video content from planting to harvest, from the latest agronomic research to the latest in production technology. Check out our massive video library on YouTube, RealAgriculture.com, or download the audio podcast versions wherever you get your podcasts. The Soybean School is brought to you by Pride Seeds, BASF, and Syngenta Canada.
Welcome back to RealAg Radio for the RealAg Issues Panel. Shaun Haney, your host, joined by my colleagues at Real Agriculture, Kelvin Heppner and Lyndsey Smith. And let's bring him in. Lyndsey, how are you doing today?
So great. I have a smile on my face. I'm laughing. Everything's fine.
It's the jokes I tell during the commercial breaks that makes you smile, isn't it?
It is true. I do want to say we're having wicked weather here around the Ottawa area. So just yesterday we had another 2 tornadoes confirmed just south of the city. It's a bit wild this summer, I'll be honest. Yeah. So we're going through that.
Is the tornado watches that you have had, or is that typical or is this abnormal?
It's not out of the realm of possibilities for sure. The amount of them has definitely is a step up from the average for sure. So Ottawa does get severe weather and tornadoes relatively often, let's say, but it has been an incredibly active summer season. So yes, I think the team at Real Agriculture is a little sick of me letting them know that, hey, I'm under another tornado watch and or warning. Yesterday was a warning, and might go offline at any time. But thankfully, no one's been injured, so that's all good.
Yeah. Coming in like a tornado full of information is Kelvin Heppner of Altona, Manitoba.
I don't know about that, but we have had the most calm summer weather that I can remember in a long time here. This week we actually had to test our automatic generator for the barn because it hasn't. Usually at this time of year, I don't bother testing it because it has to run every few weeks because the power goes out due to wild weather. That hasn't happened at all this year. I think we've had 1 or 2 thunderstorms, and certainly we're missing the rain that comes with a lot of that weather.
How far are you from harvest?
Winter wheat and rye is coming off around here, and some of the earlier spring wheat fields that have really suffered from a lack of moisture earlier in the growing season, they are starting to come off. On our farm, we're still probably, 10 days, maybe 2 weeks away.
Okay. Harvest is here. Okay, let's get to all the topics. Let's start off with the jobs numbers. The U.S. created 187,000 jobs in July. Canada lost 6,400 jobs. Kelvin, what do we make of the report that came out, or the 2 reports that came out this week?
Both of these reports, I think, both out today, would indicate that things are cooling off a bit. Expectations in the U.S. were for a number closer to 200,000. It came in, like you said, at 187,000 jobs in July. Here in Canada, also, unemployment rate rose slightly by 0.1 of a percentage point. It's now at 5.5% unemployment rate, which is, of course, still low, but it's up from 5.2% a couple of months ago. And also immigration here in Canada. Sure, we saw a decline of 6,400 jobs. At the same time, I believe immigration was somewhere up around in the 80,000. They measure it at around 82,000 in terms of population growth in the month of July. So certainly not everybody is finding work, even though we continue to see tight labor scenarios in a lot of agriculture and agriculture adjacent fields. But it's looking like things are softening a bit on the labor front. And this would be, of course, a tick in the box of maintaining that overnight rate in the next Bank of Canada decision, which I believe is coming up in September.
It is. Yeah, September. Yeah.
6th. That's what it's
a lot of talk this week in economic circles as you watch like Fox Business and CNBC of softer landings. And but at the same time, Lyndsey, when I look at a U.S. unemployment rate of 3.5%, I just have a hard time getting like that. That's like, how do you find workers?
Right. Well, and Canada too, right? I mean, both countries are struggling with, and I think you had David Coletto on the show here earlier, and I saw the number this morning, but I think he iterated somewhere between 700 and 740,000 job vacancies in Canada right now. Okay, that's like 3/4 of the size of Ottawa job openings. So it's not like there isn't industry happening, and it's not like there isn't gainful employment to be had. Yes, we might be making jobs, we might be shedding some jobs, but there is an incredible amount of productivity that should be happening that isn't. And I'm having a really hard time wrapping my head around how we move through this and past it into something more positive. Well, I really don't know.
Canada already has a productivity issue in comparison to some of the other G7 countries, Kelvin, but it's 5.5%. We're still relatively low, are we not?
Oh, exactly. But yeah, it is low. There in agriculture, of course, we feel like we do have a lot of vacant jobs, and these numbers show that there's more immigration population growth happening than what there is job creation, at least on a month-by-month basis. And that's something we always have to keep these reports taken with a grain of salt. It's 1 month, so how much do you think, Barry? It's more about the trend than exactly what happens within the month. But yeah, you're right. It is still low. It's creeping higher though, and this is where the Bank of Canada and Federal Reserve, they want to see inflation come down before unemployment spikes, because that's kind of the criteria for a soft landing, from what I understand, in terms of nobody wants unemployment to spike, which is often the case heading into a recession, of course.
Yeah, and in August here, our RealAg Studies issue that we're going to survey on actually is interest rates and inflation and the impact and changing of business and management decisions going forward based on that. So that's going to be some interesting data that we can compare back to April of 22, where we at last time asked about interest rates and inflation. So look out for that, those of you that are part of the RealAg Studies Insights panel. So that's going to be some very interesting stuff. Now, new Ag Minister, or new again Ag Minister, Lawrence MacAulay 2.0, what we call him. He made his first trip out as Ag Minister, and he went to Alberta. Lyndsey, what's the signal here?
Well, I think that, yes, as you mentioned, everything old, I suppose, is new again. We go back to Lawrence MacAulay. I think it's significant that he's headed out west for his first big meeting with the new Ag Minister in Alberta. Realistically, we know that this government is not necessarily seen as, super West friendly. And, coming from having an Ag Minister out of Quebec that I think was, Bibeau was very active in traveling as well, but I think Lawrence MacAulay will definitely put in the effort to travel about and meet and be out west, perhaps maybe a bit more than we've seen. I think it is significant to make that visit. We know that drought and some of the business risk management programs are still in the works of being triggered. I think, Kelvin, unless we've seen otherwise, we still have some meetings happening on those for Alberta, BC, and I think it's Saskatchewan. So, will it significantly change the feeling overall? Probably not. But as far as agriculture is concerned, it's probably a really nice olive branch.
Kelvin, I need you to clear something up for me. Okay? I know you have analyzed the appointment of Minister McCauley quite thoroughly. Some of the description, and I think it was an iPolitics article, quoted some ag stakeholders as referring to his appointment as ag minister again as providing stability to the position. And okay, that's a nice word. What the heck does that mean?
Well, I think it's his familiarity with the files. He, of course, spent time as agriculture minister, and some of these files haven't changed a whole lot since he was the minister, and that I think is a big part of it. He's familiar with the issues. He's familiar with the people. He has the relationships. He knows the farm group leaders and stakeholders. A lot of them are still the same from when he was minister. So I think he can hit the ground running in a lot of ways here with filling the role. And we know, of course, Minister Bibeau put a lot of effort into learning and getting up to speed with agriculture, but she was quite green, quite new, and I don't mean from an environmental sense alone. In terms of she had to build an understanding of all the roles and different factors in a complex industry like agriculture and food. And so I think that's where this sense of stability comes from. I do think that there's also, like, this is a positive framing of it. There's more negative criticism that we could also hear, and I'm not sure that farm groups necessarily want that type of point of view being shared publicly. So I think that's where the choice in terms of describing this as stability probably came from. Okay,
because Lyndsey, you could take it a couple different ways. You could be like, well, in comparison to the prior minister, and I didn't think that there was anything about instability. And if I think about Minister Bibeau as ag minister, or maybe more likely, as Kelvin I think is referring to, it's more stable than what could have been. Right?
Yeah, yes, because, and I mean, we had that conversation when we knew, a cabinet shuffle was happening. Most of us really didn't actually have a move out of agriculture even happening. And if it did, I think that most of us would have, probably chosen just about anyone but Lawrence McCauley, not because he didn't do the job before, but it just seems odd to go back to someone who did the role as opposed to someone else. So, stability wise, yes, it's someone that we know. And I guess, we could throw it out there. We could have had, Environment Minister Guilbeault move to agriculture. We could have had, another
Jonathan Wilkinson
minister. We could have had Wilkinson move there. So, that would have been perhaps more of a raucous kind of posting for sure. It could have created a lot of, uncertainty, instability, let's say. Yes, exactly. A disruption for sure. So now, I would say that if we look at, McCauley as minister before Bibeau, it was pretty stable, sure. So that's probably a fair assessment. I think that, there's still some open files that definitely need some work here, and it will be interesting to see where McCauley puts his priorities, what his mandate might be, and where it goes from there. But there's still some significant things to tackle here.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, let's take a break. We'll be back with more of the RealAg Issues Panel right after this.
Did you know that Pioneer now has a full lineup of Enlist E3 soybeans? Take a look at Pioneer brand Enlist E3 soybeans for the highest yield potential and for the best agronomic package and herbicide trait options. From the lab to the field, Pioneer brand Enlist E3 soybeans are the best in beans, period. Ask your local Pioneer representative about Enlist E3 beans.
Canola is more than just a pretty face in the prairie landscape. It's a big business, both here and around the world, that requires you to be informed and up to date on everything it takes to grow a successful crop. The Canola School on RealAgriculture.com has an expert library of video resources covering markets, agronomy, and more to help you grow a healthy and profitable canola crop. Visit canolaschool.com today. Brought to you by BASF Canada and Invigor Hybrid Canola.
And welcome back to RealAg Radio for the RealAg Issues Panel. Shaun Haney, joined by Kelvin Heppner and Lyndsey Smith, all of us of Real Agriculture. This segment's brought to you by Granubor from US Borax. Ask for it by name. Go to borax.com. Okay, this week we are putting together the results of the July 2023 Canadian Farmer Sentiment Index. And that's going to be the videos that we produce, and we got stories already up on the website about some of the things that we asked farmers across Canada about. What really sticks out to me, Lyndsey, is that we've been doing this for a year now, okay? So we started doing this last September. So we've got like pretty much a year round of data. And Canadian farmers are quite pessimistic and much more pessimistic about the future than they are about their current farm financial performance. So if you look at the current farm financial performance, 96, which is essentially neutral at 100, okay? But if you look at future, it's 84. And so the whole last year, we're much more pessimistic about the future than we are current, and we never really catch up to that pessimism that we expected in the future, which I think is kind of interesting.
Well, it's sort of like the forecast where the rain is always 10 days out, and then they just keep moving it 10 days out, right? But it's the opposite, because that would be good if you need rain. It's the opposite. We're pessimistic, but we're doing okay now. And then 2 months later, we're doing okay now, but we're still pessimistic. We're just waiting for the other shoe to drop. No, I think that if we think about what the last year has been, and one of the things I'm really looking forward to is getting into year 2 of doing these surveys, because then we'll start to maybe be able to see some seasonality maybe in how we feel about things, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, we've certainly internally talked about, will we see seasonality? Are farmers more optimistic when they're sitting in the combine, they know the crop they have, when they've got a good handle on things? And are we at our lowest ebb, when we're putting a crop in the ground and the weather's not cooperating and all those sorts of things? So will we see that come out in the data? Maybe. I also think that, it is an indication of how many unknowns farmers deal with month by month and season by season. We're always looking ahead to, what could happen yet. We've got weather markets, we've got geopolitical issues, we've got interest rates, Kelvin's favorite, inflation. All of these things, are maybe in the immediacy you're doing okay, but it's definitely been a trying year as far as some of the decisions farmers have had to make and where things have gone. So I'm not entirely surprised. And I do wonder, and I know you are going to compare maybe some to the US, but I sort of do feel like Canadian farmers in general are perhaps a little less enthusiastic on the optimism side overall versus our American counterparts.
Actually, there's a big difference. And I want to dig into the why of this, because I don't know why the gap exists. So, maybe Kelvin does. We'll get to we'll put this to him, Lyndsey. So, Kelvin, in Canada, current farm financial performance 96. The U.S. is 121. Future farm financial performance, Canada 84. The U.S. is 124. Okay, if we look at and if we look at even broadening that out even more so, in the next 5 years, will we experience widespread good times or widespread bad times? The American farmer, 39% of them said bad times. In Canada, 69% said bad times. We are much more pessimistic about the future of the industry in Canada versus our neighbors to the south. Why?
This is something that certainly deserves a bunch of research and study. I can think of two, just off the top of my head, I can think of two factors. One is on the political side of things. The U.S. government, we saw this when it came to retaliating against China, or the trade war with China and everything. The U.S. government stepped up with major dollar amounts in terms of direct payments to farmers and making sure that they stayed as whole as possible, or at least there was some effort there to compensate producers for the impact there. So we've seen on the political side of things a difference between Canada and the U.S., where the U.S. has certainly given a quite clear signal that the government has farmers' backs. I'm not sure if that will be the case going forward, or if that happened today. I don't know, but I think there's a political difference on both sides of the border versus in Canada right now. There's a feeling among farmers that the federal government is doing more things to make it difficult to farm than to make it easier to farm. That's the political side of things. And the other, I would say, is more on the financial economic side, and that is regarding interest rates. And I think Canadian farmers are feeling the burden of increasing interest rates quicker than American farmers do. And some of this, we it would be interesting to do an in-depth comparison of terms of loans and how long farmers have their loans locked in for. In the U.S., it's quite more common to lock in your interest rate for a longer term than in Canada. And I think Canadian farmers' assessment of their financial performance and future financial performance, right now, I think a lot of this decline has to do with we're seeing interest rates rise and we're having to renew mortgages and the rates are jumping quickly. And even just to purchase land, I know back of the envelope math here in our area, if you want to buy land this summer versus last summer at the same price for the same length of mortgage, I believe it's around $100 an acre, $90 to $100 an acre more that you have to make in land payments on an annual basis. So right there, that takes a good chunk out of your profits. And so I think that's what's driving, I don't know, these are just hypotheses, theories, but I don't know. What do you guys think?
Well, the Ag Barometer does say that one of the things that has drugged down the optimism or the cautious optimism in the U.S. is interest rates. Now, when it comes to confidence in making farm investments, here's what's interesting. The U.S. farmer and Canadian farmer is not that much different. They're both hovering around 50 when it comes to is right now the right time to make investments.
And that's where things would be more even, though, in terms of what if you're adding to your mortgage or taking out a new mortgage or loan today in either side of the border, you're getting kind of the same rate or relative speaking. But if an American farmer has their loans locked in at a lower rate for a longer time, they haven't had to deal with the rising rates to the same extent as maybe north of the border.
I am fascinated too. You guys know this. I have this pet sort of like project that goes through my head in terms of like the Canadian culture. And I wonder if that is a little bit not more at work. That's a piece of this.
That's probably part of it too. You're right.
That's probably part of it.
Aspect. You're right.
Yeah. Like there's less like, I want to describe this properly is that I spend a lot of time in both countries. There's a little less like, there's much more like wrapping yourself in the flag of agriculture and from that aspect than in Canada. And I also think there's a little bit more of a likelihood in Canada that, and these are all very qualitative things, but there's a little bit more of like things aren't going well. And we don't talk about success a lot. I think we talked about this a couple weeks ago. That's one of Christian Hebert's big criticisms of agriculture is that we don't celebrate success. And so we just talk about how bad things are all the time. And maybe that drives some of the sentiment. I want to dig into this because I really think this is fascinating from just two countries so close, growing same crops, raising same livestock. There is some differences, but there's a lot of similarities. Why is the sentiment so different? Anyway, Lyndsey, you were going to say something. Sorry, go ahead.
Well, yeah. So I think there is a culture difference, and this is why we have these conversations, is to look into some of it. It's part of why we ask the questions that we do and look back at them. But I think to Kelvin's point on the political side, it would be difficult, I think, to find a farmer right now who politically at least is like the last 5 years have been amazing, right? Like we've had a lot of things thrown at us as an industry that we're trying to wrap our heads around and trying to figure out, how do we continue farming, going forward with the $170 a ton carbon tax, just down the road. Like there are a lot of, I think, political uncertainties that are going to add to that for sure. So I think that, it's a combination of many things, but I think the political side, there's a lot of people who feel like, the government is not on their side at all. And that's demoralizing, right? Like that can be incredibly tough to navigate.
I use the tariff compensation as an example, but there are other examples such as carbon policy. Look at how in the U.S., Secretary Vilsack talks about carbon as an opportunity for agriculture, and it's definitely much more of a carrot approach versus in Canada, it's more of the stick we're seeing in terms of how we need to reduce emissions, and we're talking about fertilizer emissions reduction targets and on those types of things. Sure, there is carrots when you get to the actual programming and the rollout of it, but just the overall perception in the U.S., I think, is that, and this ties in with what Shaun was saying about agriculture being wrapped in the flag in the U.S. and being kind of this more pride, I think, in more proud of being involved in agriculture and more confidence and all those types of things that we see south of the border in Canada, where maybe not as bold in speaking that way and perceiving things that way.
Okay, we got to take a break. We got more coming up here on the RealAg Issues Panel. You're listening to RealAg Radio, Rural Radio 147, Sirius XM.
Whether you're seeding, harvesting, or anything in between, the Wheat School on RealAgriculture.com has you covered. Timely agronomic information from industry experts available online anytime. Give your wheat crop a good start and a great finish with the Wheat School on RealAgriculture.com. Brought to you by C&M Seeds, Syngenta Canada, and the Alberta Wheat and Barley Commission.
Peter Johnson at Wheat Pete, RealAgriculture.com. I'm the host of The Word, and I love doing The Word. I love the questions. I love the challenges. I love having to apply agronomics to all over the globe and areas outside of my normal jurisdiction. Also, I love the feedback the most, where growers challenge me, tell me about their plot results, help me to learn. The Word, absolutely the best part of my day.
And welcome back to RealAg Radio, RealAg Issues Panel. Your host, Shaun Haney, joined by Lyndsey Smith and Kelvin Heppner of Real Agriculture. I can't believe we missed the most important question of the week is, Kelvin, how many tickets do you have reserved for Taylor Swift in Toronto?
I was wondering if we talk about this.
None. No.
No?
Yeah.
Not a Swiftie?
Nope.
I'm not either. Lyndsey is.
I love Taylor Swift. I think she's brilliant. I love her music. Did I register to then buy tickets for a show that's 18 months away? No. I am still, I'll put it out there to everyone. If you want to invite me, like a month before, give me a ringy ding. But right now, I cannot plan that far ahead, and I sure as heck could not spend the time sitting on there to register. But I know lots of people that did. So many people, and I know she'll sell out all of them. So brilliant.
Do you think that?
Oh my goodness.
Would you prefer that she do the 6 shows in Toronto or make her way across the country?
I definitely, and I don't know. Like, I understand the logistics of it, and Shaun, I think you've called it a residency on the road, right? I get it, but I think it's a big country. Why would you not split it up at least in 2 or 3? I don't know. Anyway, and I know that there are probably people who are like, it's expensive enough to get tickets. Now I have to travel to Toronto. Yeah. I mean, I guess there's enough lead time to save up for it, whatever, but I think I would have liked to have seen shows across the country.
Okay, that's enough. That's enough Taylor Swift talk. Sorry, go ahead, Kelvin.
No, Kelvin.
There seems to be the same thing happening in music and concerts as we see in other parts of the economy, where the big get really big and the middle kind of disappears.
Yes.
To me, I wonder. I don't know. I would enjoy going to a local artist or a much smaller, less famous artist just as much or more than having to fill out the massive amount of money and travel costs and all of that and lines and whatever. Yeah, it's a backyard. Give me a backyard concert or one in the local park versus having to fly to Toronto to watch with tens of or 100,000 other people. Yeah,
well, hey, I saw Steve Earle last summer at Rexford in Montana, right at the at the lake. It was awesome. Copperhead Road. It was great. You're right though. Like big venue concerts, okay. Like small venue, so much better. Like I saw Dierks Bentley at the Ryman. We paid $35 US to go. It was phenomenal.
It's a steal of a deal.
And Chris Cornell at McEwen Hall in Calgary, with just that's like a little high school gymnasium. It was fantastic. Yeah, I agree. I'm more of a small concert person. Okay, let's get back to some of the issues of the week here. If you thought that Taylor Swift was a big topic this week, what about bacon prices? Listen to this. Wholesale prices for pork belly, the cut of meat used to make bacon, have surged this summer, according to the Wall Street Journal, nearly tripling since the start of June after hitting a multi-year low in May. Pork belly prices were at $2.15 a pound on Wednesday, just shy of their highest level since last August. The run-up could soon pressure restaurants and supermarkets that had been stepping up bacon promotions. Kelvin, bacon. This is not good, especially if the price gets high and we have some sort of a shortage issue.
I'll take it. It was at multi-year lows, and we, of course, have seen the struggles that the pork industry has gone through. If this means higher prices for pork producers, I don't mind paying a little more for bacon.
Well, Anne Wasko in the Beef Market Update, she did mention pork. She probably had her fingers crossed when she did it, but she did mention pork, and retail pork prices down 7%. So overall, but obviously bacon definitely on its way up.
Is some of this linked to also the new requirements in the U.S. with California? Of course, California's got all the attention, but a bunch of other states, of course, also passing laws around production practices, and I'm wondering, is that part of this?
Oh, big time. I think there's a lot of concern about Prop 12. We heard from the Canadian Pork Council, they're concerned because it's going to create problems when it comes to exporting pork into the U.S. to eventually get to California. It's a huge states' rights issue. There's a lot of discussion on whether or not they can actually fix Prop 12 federally in the farm bill that is likely to get extended at this point. And so this is a bit of the battle here in terms of states' rights in the U.S., but it definitely impacts countries like Canada as well that are looking to tap into those markets. Of course, California, a big economy, and imports most of its pork. So the rules they're putting on inside that state actually impact production out of the state than inside the state. It's a little bit crazy.
And it turns out rules for how food is produced at the farm level affect prices in the store.
No.
Who knew?
Lyndsey, this is craziness.
It is. Well, it is a bit. And I'm with Kelvin. If we can, improve numbers for our hog producers, they're not having a great time. And so this is, this is important. This is not, of course, unknown in the hog industry. It's feast or famine. And certainly I've heard more than one hog producer say if they could make the pig entirely made out of bacon, they'd be laughing. They'd have no problem with profitability. Yeah. And this just goes to show it that, bacon, especially as you see pork belly also showing up on menus, I'm sure there's more demand for that particular cut and for bacon. But yes, when you put significant pressure on how a particular either livestock or product is produced, and you're going to make it cost a whole bunch more to produce, it's going to put some pretty significant pressure on those producers, and it's going to make its way to the retail side. So yes, Kelvin, it actually does make a difference. And there you go. So
I think one of the most underrated food dishes is pork knuckle. We need more pork knuckle. We're going to Agritechnica in November.
There will be a lot of pork there.
Yeah, the German cuisine. Yes, Kelvin's been with me to Agritechnica. The lane is incredibly narrow. Okay, yes. You better like protein, you better like potatoes, and you better like soup and some beer. It's not a lot of diversity, but let me tell you, they do it right. It is so good. Kelvin, go ahead.
I was just going to say a lot of schnitzel.
There's that too.
But also, like, the hocks, like a ham hock.
Yes.
Oh my gosh. Like, I've only been to Germany once, but, like, you're right. Pork was center stage every single meal, but just delicious.
You can't find a glass of water anywhere. But pork, absolutely.
Do you need a ham hock? I got extra. They're in my purse. Here you go. Yeah. So good. Anyway.
Kelvin, Buhler Industries is looking for an investor or a strategic partner. You posted a story at RealAgriculture.com. It's going to be featured in our machinery email tomorrow morning that goes out. You can get it by going to RealAgriculture.com/subscribe if you're not getting that newsletter. Give us an update.
Yeah, so the company, Buhler Industries, they make versatile tractors, Farm King equipment based in Winnipeg. They sent out a press release this week saying that they have engaged an investment bank out of Toronto, Origin Merchant Partners, to find an investor who will be driven by a commitment to preserving the legacy of the iconic Versatile and Farm King brands. So not a lot of details have been shared or said publicly in terms of why this is happening. Buhler has consolidated operations and divested some of its manufacturing assets in Alberta and North Dakota, Minnesota over the past couple of years, centralizing things at the tractor plant in Winnipeg and in just down the road from where I'm at here in Morden, Manitoba. That's where the Farm King equipment is built. They have over about 800 employees here in Manitoba. And of course, the big complicating factor in all of this is that Buhler is 96-97% owned by Rosselmash, the Russian farm equipment manufacturer. Going back to 2007, they bought a majority stake in Buhler Industries. And so it's unclear. There's a lot of questions and attempts at reading between the lines here as to what's happening. Buhler and its ownership, Rosselmash, the main shareholders, have not been the subject of any sanctions. There were calls back in March 2022 of that sanctions should be applied against some of the individuals involved in Buhler's ownership group. That has not happened to date, and so just it's interesting. We're trying to find out more, but Buhler looking for an investor, a long-term investor, investment partner, potentially buying an ownership stake in the company. I'm interested how this all what happens here, because the ties to Russia, it's kind of uncomfortable for someone to make a large scale investment without owning the whole thing. It's gonna be interesting to see how they steer through that. I think is a big piece of it. You go back, times change and social pressures change. You go back to 2007 when Rosselmash bought Buhler. It was big news because it was a big dollar amount and that kind of thing, but there wasn't the strings attached that there is today after Russia's invasion of Crimea in 2014, and then again the invasion of Ukraine in 2022. Both times there's been calls for sanctions against some of the individuals who are in the Rosselmash, or who are owners of Rosselmash, the parent company. And so we haven't seen any sanctions from Canada's part. So not sure if that allays some of the fears of a potential investor here, and who knows where this investor will come from. It might not be from North America either.
Hey, Lyndsey, really quick, one of the things in the news cycle that happened this week that really, I guess, was maybe just people just sort of knew or expected it. It didn't get a lot of run. The Prime Minister and his wife have separated.
Yeah, and I find it sort of interesting. I feel like perhaps international news markets found this more interesting than Canadians did. And I'm not going to speculate as to why that is. Perhaps we just not that fuzzed up about it. There are some people certainly that took the opportunity to make some pretty hilarious memes. I won't lie. But yes, so the Prime Minister and his wife did announce jointly that they have separated, and Sophie Gregoire Trudeau, right now at least, has moved into her own place in Ottawa here and is not going to have any staff, nor is she going to have any dealings with official events or anything like that going forward. So I don't know. I mean, I think certainly, yes, a lot of people talked about it for a couple hours or for the day, and then I think we've probably mostly moved on. I think it's perhaps noteworthy. I believe the last time this happened, it was also a Trudeau in office, Pierre Elliott Trudeau, his father. So there you go. History repeats itself, I guess.
We definitely, this would be treated a lot differently in the U.S. because of the ceremonial position of the First Lady. It's different in Canada.
Yeah, we don't really have a First Lady.
No, we don't. So, hey, we're out of time. That's it. We can't even get Kelvin to break down their divorce. Hey, Kelvin, have yourself a great weekend.
Thank you, and thanks for leaving me out of that one.
But I totally included you in the Taylor Swift conversation. Hey, Lyndsey, have yourself a great one.
Yeah, cheers, everybody.
If you have any feedback on today's show, send me an email, shaney@realagriculture.com. Hey, thanks, everybody, for getting real and getting connected with RealAg Radio, and we will chat again next week. Cheers, everybody.